Hey, this is Dominic, and this is your home for the cutting-edge conversations on optimizing your personal performance, lighting up your sex life, and living a purpose-driven life of your own design.
These are the topics that Dominic and I have both struggled with in our own lives and still don't always get right. This is Brian. Welcome to the Great Man Podcast.
Hello, my brother. Hey, I got to tell you how excited I am about our Facebook group that supports this podcast. If you head over to Facebook and you type in the Great Man Within podcast, you can find us. It's a men's only group. Sorry to our amazing women listeners, but there's some places men got to go on our own. The discussions over there have become really vibrant and engaging. We talk about our favorite books. We have discussions about these episodes and how to put them into practice. We've got a global audience of men from all over the world, men from different age ranges, learning from one another. It's a really powerful group that's starting to grow in ways even more inspiring than I could have anticipated, when I architected this thing from the beginning. So if you haven't joined us yet, head over to Facebook, search the Great Man Within podcast, or just go to the show notes and click the link I put there and become part of the discussion. So today we are talking about a very simple exercise to uncomplicate your busy life. Now, David Allen wrote a book, an acclaimed book on productivity called Getting Things Done. And he outlines 3 reasons why big goals fail. Number 1, big goals fail because there's too much distraction at the day-to-day level to allow for appropriate focus on your higher goals. I certainly know what that feels like. The second reason is that most people have ineffective personal organizational systems to get things done. That's why Brian and I are so passionate talking about morning routines, evening routines. And the third reason why big goals fail is we just get overwhelmed by all the to-dos that are out of alignment with our values. So today, I'll be outlining a very simple exercise that will help you to eliminate these 3 saboteurs of success. Because I know that you are playing big goals and big games in your life. Now, I ran the men of the Great Man Mastermind through this exercise 3 weeks ago, and joining us on our show today is one of our members, Nick Rago, who will let you know about the profound effect that this exercise had on his self-awareness and some of the simple changes that he's been able to make over the last 3 weeks that has led to better sleep, more sleep, a better relationship with his kids, and he's even knocked out a goal that he's been postponing for months just by making a few subtle changes. Now, for your context, Nick is a husband, a father, and an incredibly successful salesperson for Prudential Financial, which is where I spent 15 years. And Nick also has a profound passion for food, wine, and booze, and he even has a side hustle business around it called The Nick Experience, which you'll hear us discuss on the show. So in this episode, you're going to learn about how to identify your special brand of how you complicate your own life. We're going to go through a step-by-step process for uncomplicating that part of your life and other parts of your life where you complicate many things like how you manage your time, how you manage the vices in your life. Nick talks about food and booze. I talk about porn or any other area of your life that prevents you from living the greatest version of yourself. And to help you do this, I've created a downloadable template of this exercise, which you can get at doinnerwork.com on the resources tab. You can also click that in the show notes. So enjoy today's episode on a simple exercise to uncomplicate your busy life featuring Nick Rago. All right, so we have a first timer on the Great Man Within podcast. Nick Rago, welcome to the show, buddy.
Thank you, Dom. I love being a first timer.
Yeah, you do the first time thing well. You are a man of the Great Man Mastermind. And one of the reasons why you're here today, well, first of all, is because Brian's on vacation gallivanting around the New Jersey shores with his lovely woman, Becca. And I needed a co-pilot today, man. I was feeling like, I'm doing enough solo episodes. We want to bring another voice on the show. You're not only an enlightening human being, you're also funnier, way funnier than I am. So I'm definitely counting on you to crack some jokes because that's what Brian usually does when I'm trying to be all fucking serious.
I will channel my inner Brian as best I can. just slightly shorter.
Yeah, I want the inner Nick, man, because Nick is fantastic. So listen, man, today we're talking about how to uncomplicate yourself, right? Like a lot of the guys who listen to the show lead really busy lives. We can get quite complicated. And I was thinking about this the other day. Like I have this special brand of complicating my life. I want to know what your special brand is in a minute. One of these things that I do is like when life is on high octane, like on tilt, I get this almost high. You know what I mean? Like this drug feeling of high when I'm going 12 hours a day, knocking things off of my to-do list. It's almost like this, I get high off of it. I feel powerful. I feel frenetic. But when I'm in that state of being of like, I got to do a million things at once, I end up like saying yes to like dozens of things that just don't need to be yeses. And then like when I come down from that high, I'm still spinning all those plates and then I become resentful of all the obligations I've just created for myself. I want to burn everything to the ground and run away and hide in a hole. So that's my special brand of how I complicate my life. What do you do?
Oh my God. A horror show of saying no. So I definitely have that part in common. But when I'm running on all cylinders and I have 36 things going on, if you've ever seen a chipmunk running around in the woods trying to pick at anything he thinks is a nut,
yeah,
that's me. Just over here and I'm over here. I am all over there. I am so scattered. I end up accomplishing nothing, but I touch a lot of things. And I will turn, very easy tasks on their head. And then as I do that, I start getting wound up in my head. And then I start getting frustrated and I start getting tensed up and fired up and I can feel like anger building up inside of me. Like, why am I not getting this right?
Yeah.
And then I have to walk away and, stop being a chipmunk for a while. I would say squirrel, but everybody uses squirrel.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you being original.
Right.
I ran a workshop for a women's group yesterday where I went through this exercise about our special brand of complicating our lives. And one of the women said something very similar to what you just said, which was she gets caught up in all the minutia, like all those small little things, because when you're moving at that speed, it's almost like, where's that next pellet coming from? I need to like gobble up. And the things that are available to you are oftentimes the small things, like text messages, emails, all the small stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And she was saying that it got in the way of like her doing bigger things. And you added that extra layer of like, I overcomplicate and then the anger kicks up. So now you've got this like emotion that's not necessarily one of the most resourceful emotions, also fueling your system. So I offer that up to our listeners. What are the special brands of how you complicate your life? Some of the ones that I wrote down that as I've run this exercise for multiple groups, being a control freak, right? Like when you need to control everything, then being a control freak is not scalable. And you're laughing because it sounds like you probably have some experience with that.
Yeah, and definitely in that it is not scalable. That's a depleting activity. That's for sure.
Yeah. Control freak. As a recovering control freak myself, I can relate to that. This savior complex, like needing to fight every fight or needing to come in and solve everyone's problems, even when like you're not equipped, nor are you the one who's like responsible for like solving someone else's problems, but jumping in because maybe it makes you feel good on some level. And you also sacrifice your own well-being and the most important things in your life to go save someone.
You have a copy of like my memoirs somewhere next to you because this is reading terrifyingly accurate to my evolution as a human being.
Well, let me give you a few others that may be confronting.
Now I'm terrified.
Okay. Your inner critic. Like if you have that inner critic in your head that is like, you're not doing enough, you're not doing it right, then that inner critic complicates your life by establishing unachievable goals, right? It's like you now have to climb the Mount Everest, slay these dragons. And then when you do, because like in many of our lives, we do achieve those goals, it doesn't feel very good. Because now like our inner critic is like, all right, well, that was okay, but this is the real test.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's nice. You figured that out. But okay, here's what I really want you to do.
Build your life around that, man.
Yeah.
And I think this last one of I've complicated my life living in the land of shoulding all over myself. Right? It's like I should be building my business in this way, or I should be a good guy and call on my family more often, or I should, just like, and then like taking on obligations that I think I have to be a good guy or to be a successful guy. and I don't really find my energy around that. I complicate my life in this variety of ways. So, Nick, today we want to talk about a very simple exercise that you and I ran together in the Great Man Mastermind that helps to interrupt that pattern of complicating our lives. It sometimes just requires like a moment of attention, a moment of stillness, and like maybe a simple, elegant exercise like the one we're going to go through to help expose where and when we do these things like that we don't even recognize that we're doing. So the exercise that we ran through was the I was, I am, and I will be exercise. And we're actually going to make this worksheet. It's a worksheet that Nick walked through, and I helped him unpack this to focus in on an area of his life where he was maybe complicating things to his own detriment. We're going to make this worksheet available on doinnerwork.com on our resources tab. So you can download this at doinnerwork.com/resources. I'm going to link that in the show notes. So we looked at this category of your life, Nick, around how you managed your time and also how you managed your vices in your life. So let's just hone in on time first.
Sure.
With respect to time, what used to be your relationship with time? What is it now? And then what did you say you wanted it to be? So walk us through step by step. What was your relationship with time?
Absolutely. Oh, it was amazing how fluid or how clearly this exercise played out when we did this for something I wasn't even thinking about. So it's amazing what you can pull out of someone by just having them write it down. God, my relationship with time, I think I called myself a haphazard mess and a slave to time.
Yeah.
Which again, the first words out of my mouth were haphazard mess. I'm like, oh, that's a troubling start, but okay.
Yeah, what does haphazard mess in your life look like? What were examples of that?
Very much back to what we were just talking about, how we complicate things with trying to do everything and running around like that squirrel. I went to squirrel. But
chipmunk. You said you were
exactly.
going to say chipmunk.
Fail. But yeah, running around like that chipmunk trying to do all the things and pack as much in. There's no structure. There's no order. And you're just time owned me in that I would go from what caught my attention to the next thing that caught my attention to the next thing that caught my attention. Nothing intentional about it.
Yep.
It was just executing in random orders.
Right. So life was coming at you. You were almost like a goalie deflecting shots as much as you could, but like it's really hard to score from the goalie position, right? There was very little proactive.
Oh, yeah.
So, okay. Haphazard mess was where you were. And then like where were you? Then I am, present day.
Right. And that's where I really became, I think I'm much more cognizant of the challenges I have managing my time now. I've gotten much better, like in my 9 to 5, in managing my I like to call my formal calendar.
Yeah.
So that I'm much better with. I mean, you can't get a meeting on my calendar unless I want it there. It's just not happening. And there are certain times that you're not going to get me. This is my time. And I'm not going to yield on that. It's the outside of that formal calendar that I'm still working on. Specifically, I'd say my morning and my evening routines, especially. My evenings still run away from me.
Yep.
Or have as part of that exercise.
Well, and we're going to get into the specifics of how your evenings get away from you when we get into the vices section here, because this was pretty funny. Cool. So it's, like in your work day, when you're putting on the prudential financial hat, going to work. I remember you even said during our breakout session, you were like, when people try to put time on my calendar, I will push back if I'm not abundantly clear on why I need to be there. I will push back on if it's an hour-long meeting, do I need to be there for a full hour, or does it need to be an hour-long meeting? Can I just be there for 5 minutes? And you were saying like you actually have created this awareness about like your protectiveness around your time that you probably don't. There are some meetings that you don't get invited to that you probably should be at.
Yes.
Which is actually like, it's actually a better problem to have than being at so many meetings that you shouldn't be at, I would argue. So that just goes to show like haphazard mess to where you are today, at least in the professional sense, I would say quite a big upgrade.
It's a very different place and it feels a lot better, except when I'm begging into meetings that I should be in.
Got it.
I got way too good at establishing those boundaries. So now people are afraid to approach the border.
I think that's a good problem to have sometimes.
Yeah, I'm not going to argue that one.
So then the I will be, right? Like we hit the I was, I am, and now the I will be is the way we framed it is this is your great man, right? Like the great man inside of you is who you're striving to be. What would the great man, have in terms of his relationship with time in Nick Rago's life?
Well, I'd definitely be much more mindful of the choices I'm making with my time, just like I do in my professional life. Just if something is going to take up my time because I don't get any more back,
Yep.
it has to be something I'm fully committed to that I want to be a part of. It needs to be the proverbial hell yeah.
Yep.
I don't know where I heard that before, but possibly someone on this show.
If it's not a hell yes, then it's a hell no, man.
Yep.
Right. Cool. So then this next category that we went into, which was around vices. And this vices category I found was really illuminating for many of the men in the mastermind. You know, for me, vices in my past had to do with, say, sexuality, pornography, right? You know, your world in many respects has had this love-hate relationship in certain respects with food, right? Like, and I want you to talk about, before we get into the actual exercise, a part of your life is actually a business that you've created called the Nick Experience, which is really around your love for food, because you're an aficionado of wines and meats and like culinary experiences. But there is a point also where that's turned into indulgence and escapism and numbing. So we can talk about that. Give us a quick background on your relationship with food, your love for it, your experiences of it, this business that you've created, and then we'll go through the exercise around vices.
Absolutely. It's interesting. I think of something my father said years ago to me. He said, we eat food because it tastes good. You'd have to almost see the passion. And of course, I'm Italian, so I'm talking with my hands now.
Yes, he is.
But he made that point, which really hammered home my relationship with food early on. Like, I mean, I was cooking from the time I was 5 years old. I was just always in the kitchen. That was my thing.
Yeah.
And I was willing to try all the things, right? I mean, my wife and I will go to fine dining. We will cook at home. Throughout the COVID pandemic, I've mastered making my own cocktail bitters, making all different varieties of artisanal ice cream. I just want to use the word artisanal.
I know. I could tell the way you emphasized it. It was.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That was.
You were going to make sure you said that at some point in this interview.
That was a cheap pop right there.
Yeah.
And together, my wife and I even built an outlet on social media to really hone in on our love, our passion for great food, great wine, great cocktails, things of that nature. And I've even branched it out on my own, like you mentioned, the Nick Experience now, which is really about honing in on not only quality food, quality experiences, quality wines, but getting people past that mindset block of, that looks great, but I can't do that. It's almost demonstrated. Like, it all started out with me brewing my own beer, saying, well, I've never done it, but I can do this.
Yep.
And executing on it. So it's trying to bring people along that path, using food and booze as the mechanism, if you will. Yeah.
This part of your life that you not only create with Kim, your wife, who's like got an equal love and passion for food. And I know like a big part of her story was, I think it was her grandmother, or is it
her grandfather?
Grandfather, yeah. Right? Like infused love in food and familial experiences from a very early age around food. So like the two of you share that love because it's time for bringing people together, and your palates are refined. And so there's this loving relationship with food. And then there's something that happens where like you cross a particular line and then it turns into a vice. So what's that dark side look like for you when like food and booze becomes something other than like this loving, like familial experience?
Yes, it goes from something much more refined to something much more sinister very quickly. Yeah, there is this line where we'll go to any number of restaurants for multi-course tasting menus. Beautiful, beautiful refined experience. Come home, my wife will go to bed. If my mind's still running, I'm up. I start scrolling on my phone. And then all of a sudden I land on DoorDash. And then after this like 8 to 10 course meal 2 hours ago, here comes a fat cat being dropped off by DoorDash. And I've opened a bottle of wine for myself because, Hey, let's do this.
You need to explain to the audience what a fat cat is, because I'd never heard of it before until we did our exercise. Why don't you illuminate our audience what a fat cat is that you're receiving at 11 o'clock at night with this bottle of wine you just cracked open for yourself?
Anyone who who has gone to Rutgers, and I'm not a Rutgers grad. I learned this after the fact. Anyone down from the Rutgers, New Brunswick area will know what a fat cat is.
And Rutgers is a university in New Jersey for our international listeners. Yeah.
Right.
Rutgers probably doesn't have that international appeal, but it's definitely known in Jersey.
Yeah, they probably don't have that broad appeal, but in terms of a fat cat, they do. They are these sandwiches. That's probably, I'm going to go between a 6 to 10 inch sandwich, depending on where you get it. There are multiple varieties. My favorite is, I laugh when I describe it. It's a cheesesteak with chicken fingers, mozzarella sticks, French fries, lettuce and tomato, because we're healthy.
Of course.
On that roll. Tell me you're not in pain thinking about trying to devour that.
I mean, like, I enjoy all of those things, like, on their own, on one sandwich. At 11 o'clock at night after your 8 to 10 course meal, like for me, I can't even fathom sleeping. And like your wife let you into bed after you eat that thing?
Thankfully, she's sound asleep. And I quickly follow after I eat that thing. I mean, that is just right down. I go, you have to dislocate your jaw to eat the thing.
Yeah, right. Cheesesteak, mozzarella sticks, chicken fingers, French fries?
Yeah.
On the sandwich.
On the sandwich.
Yeah.
It's intense. It's a lot. If that isn't the very definition of gluttony, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
It's a special treat. And that's never been a strong conscious decision to say, hey, this seems like a good idea.
Yeah. It's like a reflex. At 11 o'clock, I want this thing.
Yeah. And
I go do it. And when we talk about this line, right? Because like, I think most of our listeners can relate to, there's this part of your life that feels really good. And then like you tip over that certain point and then it becomes like your superpower becomes your kryptonite. Right. And to help in identifying this line, I've named it the Heisenberg line. Okay. Cause I'm a huge fan of Breaking Bad. Anyone who's seen the show Breaking Bad will understand what I'm talking about here, where Walter White, who's the main character of the show, is a good guy living kind of this like, boring, mundane life. And then he becomes this like drug kingpin. And his transformation point is when he becomes this alter ego Heisenberg, right? There's that line where he steps from Walter White into Heisenberg. He has at that moment broken bad, right? From Walter White to Heisenberg, he's broken bad. So he now becomes something else. He's no longer just like this really smart chemist. He becomes a shrewd, destructive drug kingpin. And in my life, like my sexual energy usually is something like really powerful. It's my creative force. But then when I become like, when that Heisenberg line trips over, then I use sexuality to numb. I use it to escape. I use it to extract. It's very selfish. It's very needy. Nick goes from this like aficionado who's making his own bitters and artisanal whatevers, and creating these experiences for his wife and for other people. And then the Heisenberg line hits, and now he's devouring a fat cat at 11 o'clock, washed down with a bottle of wine that's probably like $120, and passes out going to bed next to his poor unsuspecting wife. Right?
All the while scrolling through social media like it's my job. That's the trifecta right there. The vice trifecta.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So now let's take it. Let's run it through this exercise of
sure.
I was, I am, and I will be. So just like with what we just did, where were you? Where are you? And then where do you want to go?
Absolutely. Where I was is that I didn't even identify them as vices.
Right.
I think because I have that aficionado side of it, it didn't seem like there's no vice there because I know what I'm doing. I know I'm into these refined things. I'm into good wine and things like that. And this isn't a vice, ignoring that tipping point.
Okay. So even when you were drinking that bottle at the end of the night, you were kind of like, well, I'm an aficionado. This is what an aficionado does.
Yeah. And it's not like I'm sitting there with a straw in a bottle. It was,
right.
Pour a glass, and they would, over a period of time, would drink my wine just like anyone else did, except I could knock a bottle out if I wanted to. Got
it. So you were still fancy with it. It was just
exactly
at 12 at night. Yeah. The whole bottle.
Yeah. It's just a bad timing and excess. So that's where I was just not identifying it at all as a vice. Where I am now was really coming to knowing what the vices are and still, struggling to manage them.
Yeah.
Sometimes. Primarily, the two I've had the biggest struggle with managing really are food and social media. Those are the big ones.
Yeah.
The food, I think we pretty hit on the food with the, fat cat late at night. There's no way to make that sound good or productive or positive, except it's delicious, but not in a fancy way. But the social media, wow, did I stumble into TikTok? Dear God.
Yeah, it's a rabbit hole.
That's the best way to put it is I think there's a healthy way to deal with social media. And then there's falling down the rabbit hole. In these evenings, sitting there, just scrolling through TikTok videos of all kinds of things, silly things, funny things. Of course, people, there'd be political things. And I would scroll and I'd get to a point where a video would pop up from TikTok and say, hey, you've been at this a while. Maybe you should take a break and go outside. And I'm like, it's 2 a.m. Why would I go outside now? Keep going. But the app was yelling at me.
When your social media is trying to intervene in how long you're spending on it, that's when you've catapulted over the Heisenberg line.
That may be taking it too far. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. When that video showed, and it would even get to a point where that video would show up, I go, oh, here's the TikTok one again, and pass by it. So I could numb myself out to even them standing in front of me, waving their arms up and down, going, hey, you need to slow down, Bo.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. But you bulldoze past it.
I resilient. At least that's what I would tell myself.
Yep.
But yeah, so that can still be a struggle, or has been a struggle. And ultimately, I want to get to a point, and I think I'm getting there, where I'm in control of them.
Yep.
Are they the occasional times I may get a fat cat? Sure, but it has to be a conscious decision.
Yep.
It can't be that end of the night, hey, there's nothing else going on. What bucket do I need to fill? Oh, this might do the job.
Yep. Yeah. We talk about the same thing when it comes to porn, is a lot of guys just reflexively whatever, I got this impulse, I'm alone, bang, porn, jerk off. And then afterwards be the little bit of why did I just do that? And so what we always recommend is hey, before you go down that unconscious path, can you just bring an interruption to that and say, is this what I really want to be doing now? And how will I feel at the end of this? If the answer is all green lights, then good, go for it. If the answer is oh man, this just feels like an unconscious pattern that's going to lead to a little bit of self-loathing, then maybe I will short circuit that. And that feels like a choice. That's anti-drift. That's empowerment. So that's what it sounds like you want, is that I will be state of I'm making a conscious choice, and I'll feel good about it when I give it the green light. And I will also feel good about it when I decide to say no. Right.
That's spot on. It's just making that conscious decision. If it's a go because you want it to be a go, not because there's nothing else to do, or it just feels like, hey, let's just do this. And then, like you said, have that empty feeling afterwards. That's after throwing back a fat cat, a little too much wine, and a lot of TikTok. It's not like I feel fulfilled.
Right.
I'm going to bed and going, what just happened?
Yeah, it's fascinating. You're physically full, you're mentally full, and emotionally and spiritually drained.
Right.
You're exhausted. And this is how we do complicate our lives, because when that happens, I certainly know when I've done things like that, I wake up the next day and I'm groggy. So then I have to over caffeinate myself, or I'm tired, and which is always a way that kind of sends me down the porn and jerk off path. When you get into that cycle, it kind of you kind of need more of those quick hits, those empty pleasures, those carnal desires. And it's really hard to get off that treadmill. And then life can get kind of complicated from that standpoint. That's why it's so important to go through an exercise like this. Now, with all that said, Nick, the real magic in this exercise, after this awareness of I was, I am, I will be, is this last piece of, okay, with this new knowledge, what's the next action? Right? So now with this awareness that you are standing in a place of, here's where I am today. Here's where I want to be with my great man. What's the next action I can take to climb one rung of the ladder to get there? Yep. And you put into place something very precise that you put into practice, I think 3 weeks ago, that has allowed some dividends to be paid. So talk about what was that action you took? Yeah,
this was, it was reining in those evening time sucks. That had to be done. And for a long time, my wife, she plugs her phone in the kitchen. So it's not in the bedroom at night. I always had mine on a charger next to my bed, so it was accessible. And the story I told myself was, well, if something happens with my kids who live with my ex-wife, what if they try to get me in the middle of the night?
Yep. And how old are they, Nick?
9 and 7. They both have phones now. And so I was like, well, what if something happens in the middle of the night? My wife made a great point. She goes, if something happens in the middle of the night, your phone is not necessarily going to be the first call.
Right.
And I went, So I sat with that a little bit.
And that's because
it's not a great relationship.
Right.
For sure. So just sitting in that and having that really pointed out to me was very helpful. I thought I had to come to terms with that. And I go, you know what? She's right. I moved. I have one of those nice wireless chargers. One morning she came out and it's sitting next to hers out in the kitchen.
Nice.
And I started putting the phone out there, try to shut it down about a half hour before I go to bed, put her on the charger and go to bed without it.
Nice.
And very quickly I started seeing, improvements in my sleep. I wear a Fitbit. So my 98 to 100% of my night, my heart rate is below my resting heart rate.
Really?
Yeah.
So your resting heart rate has lowered from putting your phone out of your bedroom.
Yeah. It's been big play. I'm sleeping better. I'm sleeping much more soundly. And then when the real magic that's happened so far, and there were 2 wins recently on this. One was when my kids come to stay with us for the weekend. In the past, I would say, look, you've got to plug your phones in out in the kitchen where Kim's phone is. And I'd meet a ton of resistance because mine was always in the bedroom. They want it in their bedroom.
Oh, yeah. So the hypocrite. Yeah.
And I went, you know what? This is going to make me a more impactful father in even a small bit. So the last time the kids were here and they saw my phone was out there too, plugged their phones in, no argument. They went to bed. They slept better.
Wow. Yeah. They can't argue with that, right? When dad's doing it.
Well,
I'm sure they could argue with it.
Yeah, they certainly could. Let's not get crazy here.
Yeah.
But they didn't. They said, okay. And they said, everyone's phones are here. And they went to bed. Like I said, they slept better. They were in better moods. It was a tremendous turnaround for their health.
Yep.
And for just my relationship with them, because it doesn't help me to be hypocritical.
Right.
I don't have much credibility if I'm hypocritical.
Right.
So that was a huge win. And then even more recently, it's like, how can I get myself constantly get away from the social media? I haven't looked at TikTok in weeks now. But I said, okay, but I always have my phone on me. And okay, what can I do with this that can be somewhat productive, but not late at night?
Yep.
So I found, I've talked about my family has a house up in the Poconos on a lake, and we have a boat up there. So I had been wanting to get my Pennsylvania boater safety certification.
Yep.
You can do that entire program in an app that's almost like a game. So I downloaded that, set time for it, went through that whole process, and got that certification in about 3 days.
See, I love this, Nick, because there are so many things that I want to do in my life that our listeners want to do in their lives and say we don't have time for it. And you absolutely do. It's just being clogged up by these evening routines, sloppy evenings, sloppy mornings, sloppy times throughout the day where we just go and grab the closest social media thing. And I'm still guilty of that today. But like when you bring attention to it like this thing that you've been wanting in your life for a while, done.
Yeah.
Like that.
Using the same device that is a total distraction.
Yeah. That was sabotaging. Yeah.
I was like, okay, how can I make this thing productive? Because it's not going away, right? I'm not throwing my phone away. So how can I just try to use it more effectively?
So like summarizing this, it's over the last 3 weeks going through a simple exercise like I was, I am, I will be, and then the next action for you has helped you to get more sleep, more quality sleep over these last 3 weeks. It's helped you to have a better and less complicated relationship with your kids around something, important with leaving their phones outside of the bedroom. And then also getting this like certification that you've wanted for a while that it ended up happening because you cleared the space. I mean, these are really tangible benefits of going through something like this. And if you guys choose to download this worksheet, this template, which is at doinnerwork.com on the resources tab, or, just play the game in your mind, you can take any area of your life that is maybe suboptimal right now. Nick and I just walked through the time because a lot of us still have issues with time. And Nick said that he used to be an unmitigated disaster. Is that what it was?
Haphazard mess.
Haphazard mess.
But I like unmitigated disaster too. Yeah. It's
also right on palate. Yeah.
Yes.
We went through time and vices. For you, it could be you want to go through this exercise with porn, or maybe setting boundaries, or maybe on setting goals, developing habits, morning routine, evening routine. You can do an infinite number of ways of how were you once, how are you now, and then what do you want to be? And like the standard for that I want to be is your great man. So you can certainly go through that. Nick, thank you for walking us through like your examples. I think they're going to be super tangible for the men who've been listening. And one of the things I'm really excited about with the Nick experience, right? Like this part of this business that you run outside of, your 9 to 5 at Prudential is in the mastermind. When we get together for our first immersion as a group of 20 guys together, you're going to be cultivating like this king's feast for us, like a 20-man feast for dinner. Tell us a little bit about your thought process about how you're going to be going about doing that and how you're going to be curating a cocktail list for us too.
After the abject panic of what I just committed to, I've gotten to know a lot of chefs. So I'm sure I will talk to them just in terms of planning.
Yeah.
But just kind of getting an idea from the guys in the mastermind, they're obviously knock out the obvious, like the allergies, like things like that. Like what can't we have? And try to tap into like, what are those foods that bring you back to a time and place?
Oh, I like that.
And that's coming to me as we're talking here. It just, that seems to be the starting point. Comfort food to a point, but like what our personal comfort foods are and see how we can weave that together. And if I do this right, and as I'm thinking it through, also bringing some element of getting them all involved in some way, especially if they're ones who are intimidated by the kitchen.
Yep.
Then be careful saying that out loud to me, because you will be in there and you will be handling a knife, and don't take off a finger, but we'll work through that.
You'll be chopping something.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Or peeling something.
Right.
But yeah, trying to make it as engaging and immersive an experience as I can, but staying on the right side of that line, the Heisenberg line.
Yeah.
So we may not be making fat cats, but we'll come out with something that'll be satisfying, multidimensional. Should be a lot of fun.
I really like that, man. When you said, foods that can bring us back to a certain time, the fastest thing that came to me was sauce and meatballs. Because growing up when I was a kid, my Italian family and my father coming home from work from the city and my mother having made this like big sauce and meatballs meal, it reminded me of being a kid with our family together. And I always loved my mom's sauce and meatballs. It still brings me comfort to think about today. So those moments and whatever meal we end up curating together as a group of men, just like understanding that food has that remarkable power to bring us back. Like it's almost like a time machine. And I'm looking forward to you creating that experience for us. So if someone wants to follow your work or get in touch with you to like virtually create something, like what's the best way of doing that?
Well, right now it's Instagram is the only place where the name is functioning. It's the Nick Experience, but there's no E in experience.
Yep.
So I'm on there. So right now it's still a lot of the cocktails I've experienced, tried, or made, some of the foods I've had, some of the places I've been. But it's branching more out into this, helping people learn more and get over perceived fears through food and through booze, through just getting better at it and getting more comfortable with things that can be intimidating.
Yep.
And even more importantly, I think, is the work I'm starting to do with couples, specifically working with couples to curate really meaningful experiences between the two of them. Actually working with a couple right now for an anniversary.
5-year anniversary?
5-year anniversary. And I've interviewed both of them, and I take that in and I come up with ideas that will be meaningful for each to do for the other. Like, here's the gift you want. Like 5-year, the traditional gift is wood. Okay, here's fine wood, but here's what it has to be because this is really important to your spouse.
Yep.
And you can tie this traditional piece into something really meaningful and powerful with them. So it's fun. It's evolving. I get a lot of energy from watching people reconnect, and that's what this is doing. It's really helping people reconnect. So it's fun. It's not work. It's fun.
Yeah, I can tell it lights you up, man. And you're someone who's super successful in the career that you've built at Prudential. How long have you been at Prudential now?
15 years.
Yeah, 15 years. And we spent, a good 11 years together when we were there.
Yeah.
So you've really made a name for yourself there, and also, building this other part of your life that really lights you up. And that's why also I wanted to bring you on the show, is because there are many men who are listening, who are paying their bills in one way and who also have like this fire and passion to do something bigger than that. You're a great example of not only someone who's raising a family, who's paying the bills, but also has this other passion project, that is increasing in its size and shaping your life. I think that's quite inspiring for the men who are listening. So Nick, thanks for coming on the show. I'm going to link the Nick Experience Instagram account in the show notes. And just one more reminder for any guy who's listened to this episode and you want to go through that exercise of I was, I am, I will be. The template is available, hyperlinked in the show notes, doinnerwork.com/resources. Nick, thanks, brother.
No, thanks for having me, Dom.
Hey, if you enjoyed this episode, come and join us in the Facebook group to discuss it. Talk to other men who are putting the lessons and insights from this episode into practice, run through the exercise with other guys, and there's plenty of other conversations on previous episodes. We're asking you for your input on future episodes, and it's a great community of guys who are doing deep inner work from around the world. So search the Great Man Within podcast on Facebook or just click the link that I put in the show notes below.